If you're taking the February LSAT, you don't actually realize how strong your position is right now. And so if you're feeling behind or rushed or like the clock is working against you, it's actually not true. There are a lot of LSAT timing myths that get repeated every single year, and they make people panic into bad decisions. If you're taking the LSAT in February, it is absolutely not too late for this admissions cycle. This figure shows up every single year, and every year it turns out to be wrong. The reality is, you take the LSAT in early February, you get your score back in late February. This year it's going to be February 25th. And if you submit your applications within a couple of days of score release, you are still on time for the vast majority of US law schools to start law school roughly 6 months later. Many law schools are still reviewing applications well into March and April, and some are even making offers later than that. And the most important thing to remember is that law schools do not care when you took the LSAT. They just care about what score you earned. Law schools are evaluated based on medians. The rankings, the scholarships, and their internal targets are all driven by the numbers. Stronger LSAT scores help them, weaker scores do not. But when you applied is not a factor. And so if the choice is to apply earlier with a lower score or to apply later with a higher score, the second option almost always wins. Getting a few more points on the LSAT can make the difference between getting waitlisted and getting in, or paying sticker price and getting serious scholarship money. And that trade-off is worth it. Now, if you're taking the April LSAT, you are also in a great position for the following cycle. Because if you take the April LSAT seriously, you see exactly where you stand. You can retake it in June or August if you need to, and apply the moment applications open in the fall with your best possible score. The nice thing here is that it removes the pressure from resting on a single test date, and it turns the LSAT into a controlled process, meaning that you are planning ahead for next cycle. And all of this matters more now because the LSAT is shorter and simpler than it's ever been. Logic Games is off the test, of course. They've replaced it with a second scored logical reasoning section, meaning there is now less material to study than at any point in modern LSAT history. Logical reasoning is now 2/3 of your score, meaning that every improvement you make in logical reasoning counts twice. Of course, this doesn't mean the LSAT's easy, but it is simpler. That means there are fewer parts, less context switching, and fewer skills that you have to learn. Now, when people say the LSAT feels unpredictable, what they usually mean is that they haven't stayed with the same core skills long enough to see the repetition. But once you do, the randomness disappears. Now, of course, officially there are 15 to 17 different logical reasoning question types, depending on how you count them, but not all of them matter equally. The three most common types are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. And if you master those three, you are building a foundation that supports pretty much everything else. Now, if you're short on time, especially those of you taking the LSAT in just 1 month in February, those are your highest yield areas, starting off with necessary assumption. Those questions teach you how arguments actually function because they force you to ask and answer one critical question. What must be true for the argument to work? And that single skill improves your performance across the entire section because once you understand the assumption, you know how to strengthen the argument, how to weaken it, and where it's vulnerable. The other types like strengthen, weaken, and flaw all rely on that same insight. Now, inference questions reward precision. They're not about what sounds reasonable, they're about what the facts actually force to be true. And the most common mistake here is reading too generously by adding assumptions or letting words like probably creep in. Inference questions demand discipline. If the text does not require it to be true, it doesn't count. And the funny thing is, this carries directly over into reading comprehension. So it's going to benefit you there too. Now, flaw questions are personally one of my favorite types of logical reasoning questions because they're the most predictable. The test makers reuse the same flawed arguments again and again. For example, correlation causation, confusing necessary and sufficient conditions, or simply restating the premises. If you can ID the flaw before you read the choices and prephrase it in your own words, the question changes completely because you're no longer searching for the answer, you're just looking to match your pre-phrase. Now, the LSAT has been around for decades, and during that time, LSAT has not invented endless new reasoning styles. There are a limited set of argument structures, limited reasoning errors, and limited types of wrong answers. And the cool thing is that once you've reviewed enough official practice tests properly, you start seeing the same ideas recycled with different wording, and of course, that is not an accident. The LSAT is not trying to surprise you. It's testing whether you can stay disciplined when familiar ideas show up in unfamiliar clothing. That's also why there are nearly 60 official exams in the current format, numbered 101 to 159 on LSAC's Law Hub platform. The nice thing is that you don't actually need to do all of them. And if you do too many without deep review, you're just wasting your time. You want to get exposure by doing a limited set of exams, and then you want to analyze them to learn from your mistake. And if you were to work through even 10 to 15 exams in the current format, and you truly understood why every right answer is right and why every wrong answer is wrong, you will have seen almost everything the test can throw at you. Now, let's talk about timing, because that's where anxiety does the most damage. There is a built-in gap between when you take the LSAT and when you get your score back, approximately 2 to 3 weeks. And during that time, especially for those of you taking it in February, that's when you finalize your personal statement, your optional essays, your resume, and you remind your recommenders to get you those letters. If you use that time well, when your score arrives, you can hit submit that same day, even that same hour. If you have a strong LSAT score plus a complete polished application, it puts you in a much stronger position than applying earlier with a weaker LSAT score. So if you take timing and use it to your advantage, you're going to have much more control over your outcome and still be able to apply this cycle than you would have thought.